sure, but in the end he agreed and told me he would see me at work the next day. Alex's shift. Alex's shift was a couple of hours later than mine, so I decided to pick out a book to read. That way I would have something to entertain myself while he was finishing his work. When the library closed, I grabbed my book and went to the back room where Alex's office was located. He was hunched over a number of old volumes, trying to determine what pieces of information were relevant and what was not. As much as I loved books, I would hate his job. I read for the interest in a story. What he does seems too academic for my taste. When he hears me come in, his head shoots up and a look of panic is on his face. It drops almost immediately into a normal, friendly smile, but I still saw it. He is still scared to even be here. I hope whatever he's dealing with, he can figure out. I hate seeing him like this. Alex says, I'm going to be a couple hours. Is that okay? His voice has an almost pleading tone to it. I brush off concern. Yes, it's all good, Alex. Take your time. He goes back to work, and I sit down on a chair to read. I'm just getting into the story when I start hearing footsteps walking back and forth outside the door. We're supposed to be the only ones here, but it isn't uncommon for someone to lose track of time and find themselves stuck in the building after closing, or a few teenagers just messing around. I get up and open the door to see the person out, but as soon as the door is open, not only do the footsteps stop, but when I look around for who is out there, the area is empty. I take a couple of steps out to give myself a better view, but it does not change anything. The room is empty. Great. Now I'm hearing things. I walk back into Alex's office and narrow my eyes at him, trying to act like I'm angry at him. See? Now all this talk of ghosts has me hearing things now. From the look he gives me, he doesn't not see the humor in my comment. I feel bad because I am sure he thinks I'm making fun of him, when in reality I am just trying to lighten the mood a little. Come on, Alex, I'm just kidding. He ignores me and goes back to work. I pick back up my book, feeling stupid for what I had said. I promised myself I would be quiet until he said something. That way I knew he was not mad at me anymore. I had not read an entire page, yet when the sound of footsteps started up again, rolling my eyes, I get up again to find out who is doing this. I walk over to the door and I turn the handle quickly and fling the door open, ready to confront the person. To my left, I see a dark figure dart down a roll of shelves. I charge after them. Probably not my best decision, but I was already upset about making Alex mad, so I wanted someone to take it out on. The stowaway was the perfect target. As I rush towards the row of books, I hear Alex yelling something. Christy, do not. But the words fade as I turn the corner. Charging down the aisle, I think I see the figure turn the corner, so I give chase. I've got them on the run. Now I just need to catch them. I know this library better than most, so I take her out or I can cut the person off when I get there. Though nobody is there, I cannot hear anything either, except the light panting of my own breath. That's weird. I know I saw them go this way. finding this person? Come on, it looks like you could use a distraction anyway. He seems to deflate a little before speaking. Christy, do not bother looking for anyone. No one is here but the two of us. No, Alex, I saw someone running out there. Now are you going to help me or not? My tone was harsher than I wanted it to be, and I cringed as soon as the words left my mouth. He did not seem upset though. Christy, I get that you saw something. I have seen it too. I have looked everywhere in this place already several times. But no matter what I do, I never find anybody. This is what I have been trying to tell you for the last week. There is something here. You mean someone, right? He shakes his head. No, Christy. I think there's a ghost in this building. I did not know what to say to that. Normally I would have thought he was messing with me, but he had never looked more serious in the entire time that I had known him. He actually believes that what I had seen was some sort of spirit. I had already snapped at him once tonight, telling him he was crazy did not seem to be a thing to do here. So I just looked at the ground without saying a word. The uncomfortable silence seemed to fill the space between us until he cracked first. Christy, say something. You believe me, right? I believe you believe it, Alex. I do not know if I believe in ghosts, though. I had never really had to up until this point. The answer did not seem to satisfy him, but he seemed content with the fact that I did not dismiss what he had said completely. We went back into the office, and this time I left the door open, so I had an open view of the room outside. For the next hour, there were no footsteps, or no shadows darting away from the room. We both were on edge after the ghost commented, and me running all over the building to no avail. I wanted to search the place top to bottom, but the prospect of coming face to face with a ghost, as unlikely as it was, did not appeal to me. Finally, he said he was ready to stop for the night, which was just fine with me. I was tired and hungry. He offered to buy me dinner, but I just wanted to go home and crash in front of the television for a couple of hours before bed. We hugged and parted ways for the day. He was off the next 2 days, but I restated my commitment to staying with him. He gave me a smile. Thanks, Christy. When Alex came back after his weekend, we spent several nights in a row together. Sometimes I would hear the footsteps, sometimes not. It felt like who or whatever this was toying with us. No matter what I did, though, I could never find anyone in the building. I was getting frustrated, but was unwilling to totally accept Alex's theory of the ghost. Then Saturday night came. We were in our usual spots, me with my book, Alex at his desk. We had just finished the pizza I had ordered, and I told him I was going out and finishing organizing some of the aisles I had been working on earlier in the day. He seemed unsure if being alone was a good idea for either one of us, but all he did was smile and nod at me before turning back to what he was doing. I had just finished with the first shelf and was starting on the second when I heard what sounded like stopping a few aisles down from where I was. It was louder than anything I had heard to this point. coming from. I was expecting not to see anything, which had become normal at this point. As soon as I looked, I took in what was before me, though I wish that had been the case. Floating in the middle of the aisle was what I could only describe as a shadow of a person. The form seemed to shift and change like smoke being blown around in the breeze, only again to reform. Its eyes were glowing blue color that seemed illuminated from within. My entire body began to shake. Alex had been right. As unlikely as it had seemed, he was right. Slowly it began to advance towards me. I took a few steps backward, matching its pace, keeping the space between us. Suddenly it rushed towards me. I have never been a great runner, but at that point I am sure I could have given anyone a challenge. I turned and fled with every ounce of strength that I had. I could hear his footsteps behind me, gaining on me. I called out to Alex for help, but I did not see or hear him anywhere. I was on my own, and the shadow was gaining ground. I did what I thought was best option. I ran for the office. Nothing had happened in there, so maybe somehow it was safe. I figured my only hope was to get there before it caught me. I turned a corner and I saw the light in the room. It was like a lighthouse in the fog. Alex, help. He didn't answer. At this point I noticed that I did not hear the footfalls of the shadow behind me, but I was not going to risk a look just in case. I did not know how a shadow could make a sound anyway. I ran through the doorway, grabbed the door, and slammed it shut, hoping that the shadow could not get in. I just hoped Alex was okay. Then from behind the desk, I hear a moaning sound. I rush around and see Alex on the ground, clutching his chest. Not knowing what else to do, I called the paramedics to get him some help. I know that I am going to have to get out of there to help them in, which means possibly facing the shadow once more. Alex is in trouble though, so it isn't even tough to make the choice. When I hear the sirens outside, I rush out the door, key in hand, ready to let them in. It's a blur of motion, but they get Alex loaded up on the gurney and into the ambulance, headed to the hospital. In the back of my mind, I know it is the ghost that did this to him, and I am both furious and terrified that that thing did this. I follow behind in my car, wanting to make sure he is going to be okay. I hit the emergency room door and rush to the desk. The nurse there tells me I will have to wait, but that a doctor will be with me as soon as they know something. Not being Alex's family, I know that I'm not likely to be given a lot of information, but I feel I need to be here. Not really sure what else to do, I call Alex's sister to tell her what has happened. Obviously, I leave out the part about the ghost. She says she is on her way, and she thanks me. It takes a couple of hours, but finally a doctor comes out and tells his sister and me that Alex is resting. He's had a heart attack, which at 35 seemed really young to me for something like that to happen. I see that when I think about that thing back in the library doing this to him, I swear, somehow I'm going to find a way to get rid of it. When we're finally able to go back into the room where he is staying, he is awake and dismisses the severity of what has happened to him. Personally, I do not know how any heart issue is minor, but he seems to be in good possible that the shadow had brought me to him so I could call 911. He had been right about the ghost. Could he be right about this too? So much had happened in the past week that I was not sure what to believe anymore. After that night, there was no sign of the shadow roaming the building. I do not know if it was a spirit of the soldier that wrote the diary Alex was studying or something else. It did get me to the right place when I needed to be there, though, and for that I am thankful. I still work at that library, and it is strange to think that I now have a story of my own that rivals any of the ones that I have read. Tombstone. Frustration had started to set in when my husband and I started looking for our first home. We were ready to move out of our apartment, but we needed to find the right place. Nothing had really spoken to us, and I could tell the realtor was starting to show signs of agitation. We were not trying to be difficult, but I guess you could say we might have an unrealistic expectation of finding our forever home right away. One day she called us and said she finally thought she had found the perfect place for the two of us. We had our doubts, but she seemed confident about her find, so we agreed to meet her there in a few hours. Pulling up in front of the place, I immediately knew I was going to like it. It was blue and built in the Victorian style, complete with its own turret off to the left of the building. It had a small front yard with bushes and flowers and a small oak tree that provided a little shade. Something about it almost drew me in. Weird as it sounds, the place already felt like home. I knew I wanted this place from the moment I stepped foot on the front walk. From the way my husband looked up at it, he seemed equally captivated by the house. A wave of sadness passed through me, because there was no way we could possibly afford the home on our budget from the looks of it. And I wondered why we were being shown it in the first place. When I asked about this, the realtor told us that the seller had just put it on the market, and it was priced way below market value. She did not know why, but from what she did know, the person had not owned the place very long. I did not understand why somebody would sell such a beautiful place after just moving in, and at a loss to boot. After doing a walkthrough, I fell even more in love with the place. It was everything that I dreamed of in a home. We immediately put in an offer for the full asking price, which was accepted, and we moved in 3 months later. We had just finished unpacking, and we were going to put some of the extra things in the attic for storage. It was the one place in the house that we had not gone in yet. I wondered if we would find any treasures left behind from one of the previous owners up there. I peeked my head above the opening and was disappointed not to see stacks of boxes piled here and there. In fact, I did not see anything in the space whatsoever. Then I spotted a couple of boxes in the corner, and something white behind them, propped up against the wall. Excited that I had something to check out, I hopped dawned on me, what was this thing? It was a gravestone, but why would it be up here in the attic? I walked over and asked my husband to come up and help me. He climbed up. And I ushered him over to my newly found treasure. We lifted together to the center of the room and gently lay it down. So the carved writing is visible. It is not just a gravestone, but one of a soldier. It said he was a captain in World War I. I said he had died. And he had died only a few years after the war had ended. This further deepened the mystery of how this got here. This should be in a cemetery somewhere, not in the attic of some house. The stone is too heavy for us to move safely downstairs, so we pick it up and put it back where we had found it and proceeded to store the boxes that we had planned to put up there before I got distracted. It takes us about 15 minutes and we are done. We secure the piece of wood that closes the entrance to the attic, and for the next few weeks the gravestone sort of fades from my memory. What would I do with it anyway? It was not something that I would display in my home for people to see, so I just figured that it would be best to keep it upstairs. The first strange thing that seemed to take place happened when I was getting ready for bed one evening. I hear heavy footsteps above my head that sound like they are coming from the attic. I could still hear the television on downstairs that was tuned to the football game my husband was watching when I left. He must have needed something up there and had gone to retrieve it. But that idea quickly falls away when I hear the television turn off and footsteps come sight. I'd gotten home late, so I just dumped my bag on the ground. The moment the door was shut and locked, all I had planned for that evening was to call my mom and tell her that I had gotten home okay, and then upstairs for a bath. I would take care of the bag in the morning. After making my call, I was all set to take a bath. The warm water would relax me, and I just knew I would be asleep the moment my head hit the pillow. After dumping a generous amount of bath salts into the tub, I stripped off my clothes and sank into the warm luxury. I was just starting to relax when out of nowhere I hear a loud banging coming from my front door. From the sound it made me feel like it might have been the police or someone was really needing to speak with me. My bath ruined, I got out, toweled off, and put on a quick change of clothes. The entire time the knocking continued, gaining in both pace and sound. "Hold on, I'm coming," I yelled as I entered the living room. As soon as I caught sight of the door, the knocking stopped immediately. I know I had yelled that I was on my way, but to have someone this insistent that they would continue knocking for nearly 5 minutes, then so abruptly stopped, made me a bit uneasy. I walked up to my door and stuck my hand out, ready to unlatch the door. But the moment my hand touched the lock, the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Call it intuition or whatever, but something was telling me that I did not want to open the door for some reason. Instead, I reached over and flipped on the porch light and pushed aside the blinds to see if I could tell who was outside. Moving my head back and forth, I surveyed the front step, but I did not see anyone. I squinted to see out to my driveway, but once again, nobody was there either. I started to get a really bad feeling about what was going on, enough so that I started to shiver. I pulled my cell phone out of my pocket and hit speed dial for my mom. She answered on the second ring, asking me if I was okay. It was not normal for me to be calling back like this unless something was wrong. I told her what had happened, and she said to make sure all the windows were locked and the doors were as well. She stayed on the phone as I went around my house and checked. Once satisfied that every entrance was secure, I went back to my bedroom and sat down on my bed. My room has always been a place where I felt safe, but for some reason tonight this did not seem to be the case. I told my mom I needed her to come and get me. She lived almost 30 minutes away and it was already pretty late, but my mom did not hesitate to tell me she was on her way. I thanked her and hung up the phone. I laid back onto my comforter and tried to take a few steady breaths to calm my nerves. I began to hear a rattling noise coming from the other side of the room. I looked over and noticed it was coming from the direction of my closet. The door handle slowly started to turn on its own and emitted a soft click as the door swung open about 3 or 4 inches. I sat there staring at it, expecting someone to burst out at any moment. I had a quick thought of whether I should call 911 or if I screamed if my neighbors would even hear me. I probably sat there for 30 seconds waiting for the worst, too paralyzed by fear to do anything but look. Finally, though, I could not wait any longer. The smart move would have just been to get up and leave, but I had to know if somebody was in my house. As I got closer and closer, I started to get dizzy. is still my home. From what I've been able to gather, some spirits are attracted to negative emotions. Until I returned home from my trip, there had been plenty of that and some despair in that place. A lot of people have heard the saying, haunted by ghosts of the past. I think that something had been feeding on all the negativity I had been feeling before I left, and it had been waiting for me or just happened to be there when I got back. Since then, I did a cleansing of all the rooms. I have not seen or experienced any strange or supernatural occurrences since that night, but one thing's for sure, it is something I will never forget, and it taught me a lesson that I had to learn the hard way. Something followed me home. I've always been an adrenaline junkie, ATVs, dirt bikes, you name it. I've got one. I cannot think of anything more fun than taking one of these machines out in the mountains near my home and exploring places that I have never been before. Most days I do not see anything but the beautiful scenery of the country around me, which is never a disappointment. Other times I might find something new that just makes me appreciate where I live that much more. This story, though, is a story about me finding something that I wish I never had, because ever since that day 2 months ago, my life appears that it will never be the same again. One of my friends had told me about a new trail that he found up in the mountains above his house. He assumed correctly that I would like to join him in investigating this new location. He told me that it was a single-lane trail, so we decided to ride our dirt bikes up to see what we could find. We planned on meeting up the next day at 5 p.m. to begin our trip up. I showed up at the prescribed time at his front door, but I knew there was no way he was going up there. Up the mountain, the moment he opened the door, he looked like death warmed over. At some point in the past 24 hours, he had come down with some sort of flu. I offered to wait for him to get better, even though I was dying to go up there. He knows me well enough to understand how much things like this mean to me, so he was gracious enough to tell me to go on ahead without him. After getting instructions on how to get to where I needed to go, I load up in my truck and take off towards my destination. I have to turn around and backtrack a few times, but it isn't too long before I find this new trail that my friend has scouted out. Granted, trail might be a bit of an exaggeration here, really. It is more of a shallow groove up the side of the mountain. To me, though, it looks like my next adventure. I roll my bike down out of the bed of my truck, grab my helmet off the passenger seat. I start up the trail at a fairly safe pace at first, since I am not familiar with the area. Before long, the groove opens up a little bit and I'm able to push my speed higher, and I get that familiar sensation of freedom that I love so much. Before long, I come to a curve in a trail where I think I spot something through the trees. I pull my bike over to the side of the trail and get on. I squint, trying to figure out what I am seeing, but I just cannot tell from the distance. It is about 100 yards down the side of the hill, so it takes me a bit to get down there, but I realize what it is before I get to it. once again, though my words do not bring anything but the sound of leaves in the wind. I have had enough of this place, and I start up the hill. I'm not going to stay another minute in this creepy place. 3 minutes later, I am on my bike riding down the path towards my truck. It takes me about 30 minutes, but I've got my bike loaded up and I'm heading back towards my house. Even though I've got my music up loud, the sounds of the two voices seem to replay in my head. I just cannot figure out what had happened up there. Things are pretty normal that night and the next day. Nothing strange or unexplainable happened. Then it was like someone flipped a switch and things started happening that made me think I was going crazy. Doors would open and close on their own. Chairs would rock with nobody sitting in them. Even my fireplace tools would rattle around in their holder. That is just the start of it. I am all hearing knocking noises around the house, footsteps running about and giggling. This is not going on before I have been up on the hill. Somehow I think that I have brought back home with me the two spirits that had spoken to me by the car. Even though I had no intention or desire for this to happen, I do not think I had a choice in the matter. So far, I do not think they mean any harm, but I do not get the feeling that they have any intention of leaving. I have thought about moving, but I am sure they would just follow me to the next place too. I've tried to tell them to leave me alone, but it only seems to increase the activity, like I've upset them somehow. I guess there are only two choices: live with them or try and ride or rid them somehow. I guess there are only two choices: live with them or try and rid them somehow. It just is harder to push them away, seeing as I believe they are just kids. At some point, though, I think I will have to get them to move on. Until then, though, I think I am stuck with them. Unknown entity. I am haunted by a ghost. Yes, you heard me right. I am haunted no matter where I go. The spirit, if that is what it is, follows me. I have had a number of paranormal experiences and believe that there are spirits all around us. We just cannot always tell that they are there. This, though, is not just a fleeting vision of a shadow, figure, or an apparition that I have seen once or twice. I do not always sense its presence, but it is there. Always. It has been there with me since I was young, and as an adult, this entity has a profound impact on my life. It is possible for me to fully describe what it is like to have something like this following you around for literally years. When I first started, it felt like I was going crazy. Things would go missing only to show up in strange places. My name being whispered into my ear when I am the only one in the room. Even strange bruises appearing all over my body like something has grabbed hold of me. How do you come to terms with something that you know exists but cannot see or prove that it does? When you think you are the only sane person around you, does that really make it so? I've been in 3 serious relationships in my life. I'm not saying that this being has been the only reason why they ended, but it definitely played a major role. Whatever it is that is following me seems to be possessive of me for some reason. During the time I was dating or engaged to these men, when we would share a bed together, there would be times where they would wake up to the feeling that they were being choked to death. As the occurrences of this piled up, I realized that this happened every time for dreaming. Some people can experience the effect of this chemical after they are awake, keeping them from moving, and also give the sensation of being choked. It made sense, but to have all three of them suffer from the same condition, this did not seem likely. Also, none of them had experienced this before dating me, and the two relationships that ended stopped suffering the symptoms after we split. I did not blame them, though. How can you be with someone when you're convinced your life may be in danger? This just seemed too coincidental for it to not mean something. In the end, I always knew what was causing it on some level, even from the beginning. But this desire to be happy was greater than my logic. My current relationship, which I have been in for 6 years, is falling apart around me because of this. I've been honest about the entity that follows me with this man, and he knows I am telling him the truth. But even knowing the truth does not mean he accepts it or is willing to deal with it. In the end, I fear that I may be better off alone. At least it would be safer for everyone if I do not get involved with someone. I wish I could say that I am the only one that notices things going on, but that is not the case. I know that I've gone to bed with all the lights off in the house, only to wake up around 2 a.m. and have every single one of them on. I found my front door wide open and unlocked when I check every door right before going to sleep. There are times when you walk into the room that the energy in the room will literally feel different, almost like it is thicker in one place than the rest of the house. All of these things others have seen firsthand. Nobody except my boyfriend is willing